How many of you have heard the message that you need to focus on your strengths to be successful? That's definitely, if you want to get ahead, if you want to get stuff done, you need to focus on your strengths. The question is, how many of you right now, if you had to think about your workday, maybe not today because you're here, but think about an average workday, how much of your day would you say you get to spend doing things you love to do, using your strengths? A tenth, an hour, 5 hours, 8, 12? Do you know Gallup won? Well, you're not alone. Gallup's done research on this and has found that 2 out of 10 people report getting to do what they do best at work every day. 2 out of 10. It means 8 out of 10 people are not getting to use their strengths at work. So this message of using your strengths is quite popular, but nobody ever talks about how are you supposed to do that. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's like grabbing a fish. How are you going to differentiate yourself? How do you make sure you're getting more of the work that you want to do and less of the work that you don't want to do? How do you make sure your career's on the right track? And how even do you figure out what your strengths are? If you go into a job interview and, the question, often they want to know, tell me about your weaknesses. But when they ask, tell me about your strengths, can you list them off and give examples from your work of when you were in that moment of being able to do what you do best? I've been researching this at UC Berkeley, where I'm on the faculty, but what I also get to do is run one of the country's largest day camps. I have about 2,000 kids and a couple hundred staff, and so for the last 20 years in supervising 3,000 young people on the verge of their career, I have found this is what they've struggled with the most, is trying to figure out what they do best and what is it they should do for a job. My strength in particular is helping people figure out what their strength is and discovering that and turning that into a job. But I think a lot of our culture is really still based in a bit of a weakness-based culture. I'm also a psychologist and worked with individuals that are trying to figure out how they learn and what they do best. And I find we're still giving kids the message, both in school, in college, that we need to be well-rounded, that we need, if you're not doing well in math, what are we going to give you? More math. If you're not doing well in English or history, you're going to get more of that until you pass the class, as opposed to realizing, let's cut our losses, you've got yourself to a livable level, and we're going to focus on what you do best. I think we're still moving kids into high school and college with this deficit model. This started to shift with Don Clifton in thinking about what would happen if we looked at what was right with people rather than trying to fix them. And he's the founder of this strength-based psychology and the Clifton Strength Finder, which in the Brand You events and workshops, we use to help people answer those questions of what do you do best? A lot of the individuals that come to the workshops are really struggling with figuring out what they do well. Oftentimes, high-performing individuals have ended up on a trajectory because they can do a lot of things really well. So they have let their boss or their organization define themselves and move them along, because let's face it, your manager or the organization was really just looking out for themselves. They're trying to promote a product, build a better widget, whatever they're trying to do, they're really looking out for that bottom line. They're not necessarily looking out for you. So if you've ended up being good at a lot of things, they're going to take the thing that they need and they're going to move you through that, whether you feel like it's giving you energy or sucking the life out of you. It's really critical in a number of areas for you to help define this. Specifically, one of these areas that I find it's making a big difference in is your mental health. Major depression is the #1 psychological disorder, and I'm seeing more and more adults on medication for anxiety and depression. Now, there are a lot of things that contribute to that. I'm not going to say you not using your strengths is what's causing all of these difficulties. But when we take a look at what the research shows, you can see that I think the workplace is making a lot of people sick. Gallup studies well-being. They study engagement and strengths. And in this research, they asked how many hours out of the day yesterday, and you can even think this for yourself, were you able to use your strengths to do what you do best? How many hours a day yesterday? And, it doesn't really take a large study to see that the more you get to use your strengths, the happier you are. You're more energetic, because using our strengths brings us energy. But what's critical to look at is what happens when you don't spend more hours of the day not using your strengths, and what that increases in terms of worry, sadness, fears. People who use their strengths report having an excellent quality of life. Also, how many of you notice we're being asked to do more with less? Less people on our team, less hours in the day. There's more tasks. We're taking a lot more on. There's a bit of a productivity crisis. I work at the University of California at a large institution where we are being asked to do more with less. The question is, how do I materialize more time in the day? It really is a commodity we don't get extra of. What I have found is when you're able to use your strengths, and this is based on a lot of the work that Gallup's done, you're able to learn the job faster, you adapt to changes more quickly, you're more productive, turnover is lower, which definitely influences the bottom line. You miss less days of work, and you build stronger relationships, not only relationships with your coworkers, but stronger relationships with the customers. The other crisis we're in is this vocational crisis. A lot of the work that we do with the individuals that come to the Brand You events is help them figure out what their talents are, what do they need to focus on in order to move forward. And sadly, we're sending the message that people need to be well-rounded. And you really need to be a bit more niche and to be able to bring that piece to the table. You, in your career, are the one that's responsible for your talents. You can't rely on your boss or a recruiter to help you figure out what job you're supposed to do or what projects you're going to work best on. Sure, when you're on a project and it's bringing you a lot of energy, that is going to be some indication to you of what you do well. But if you rely on other people to start to define what you do, their interests are going to be put first. You may find out that you're efficiently climbing a ladder, but it is against the wrong house. You have to be careful that other people are not slotting you into the categories that they want you to be rather than what you need to be. As we work through some of these events, and if you were here to hear Bonin talk earlier, talent is what will win out every time. But the question is, how do you define that? The key to knowing what to do in your career is to match your passion, what it is that excites you, your interests, what is that content level that you like? Is it biology? Is it marketing? Is it advertising? What is that piece? And then you take your strengths and your talents and put those together. Everyone has talent. There's different ways we might want to look at talent, and this is where we're going to do a little test to see how you identify your own talent. So in a moment, but not yet, I'm going to put a statement on the screen, and I'm going to ask you to stand up if that applies to you. So it'll give you a chance. You might need to move some things off your lap if you're taking notes, and we're going to go through about 6 or 7 of these to see where you define your own talent. So, first one, stand up if you always talk to people in elevators, planes, stores, wherever you go. All right, look around the room, your fellow talkers. Okay, have a seat. All right, here's the next one. Stand up if you always write down a list of things to do and stick with it. Where are list makers? You can stay standing. There we go. Look around, fellow list makers. Yes, united. Great, have a seat. How many of you also, raise up hands, how many of you also write that list for like the weekends? Keep a list? Yes. An efficient weekend, well executed. How many of you need to pick someone to race while driving? Or walking, a lot of walking here in New York. Walking, yep. Great, thank you. Stand up if you always seek a familiar face at a big party. Kind of look for that one person you might know. Yeah. Great, have a seat. Stand up if you clean your home before you can relax. Yes, thank you. My house was never so clean as when I was working on my dissertation. Oh, it was tidy. Books were in alphabetical order. It's amazing how the priorities shift. Stand up if you're accused of being too nice. All right, thank you. How about those of us, including me, are accused of not being nice enough? Yes. My fellows. Stand up if you always figure out the plot of the movie before anyone else. You were in Sixth Sense and you just called it right away. Yeah. Okay. Stand up if you push the elevator to remind the button in the elevator to remind it that you're there. Push, push, push. Yep. The close door button. Yes, thank you. And our final one, stand up if you have a color-coded or otherwise organized closet. Yes, thank you. I'm just curious, how do you like to organize your closet? Who has a organization system? How do you like to organize it?
By color and then also by casual, then work, then dress.
So color first, then category. Okay, does anybody do category, then color? Right, a lot of ways to do it. And so when we think about this, how do you put all of these unique things about you, how do you put these words of your uniqueness and talents and strength, how do you describe them to other people? Because talent can't be taught. Talent can't be taught. Skills are what we teach. Talent is what we have. One of the biggest knowledge nuggets I got, and I've interviewed probably 3,000 plus people in my career in hiring so many, is when I made the shift from learning to interview for talent because I knew I could train for a skill. Whenever I hired people based on a skill, thinking I could train a talent, I was lost. See, when we think about people that we work with, we know there's coworkers, they're the idea people. And you may be that person in your group where you're trying to come up with something, the well's just dry, you go to them, and they end up being able to figure out, come up with novel things and how they go together. Those are talents. What we do at the Brand U events is we use the Gallup Strength Finder. How many have taken the Strength Finder already? Great. We use the Strength Finder as an assessment to help guide your learning about your strengths. Thousands of individuals, there's been 14 million people at this point that have already taken the Strength Finder. And it's in, I think, 7 different languages at this point. What it measures is the presence of 34 different talents. Don Clifton, through all of his research, they identified 34 different talent themes that we use at work. And you may see all these different books on the bookshelves in the airports and think there are all these different assessments. There's only one Clifton Strength Finder. There's only one assessment. The only assessment that you might see is different, which may interest a number of you, is a new one called the Entrepreneurial Profile. Is Gallup's new research has identified what talent the great entrepreneurs have. And you can take the assessment to determine what level you have that talent. Now, it doesn't say you can't be an entrepreneur if you don't have all those 10 talents, but it will help you know if you have 5 of the 10 that maybe you need a business partner with the other 5 so that you are able to well-round those 10 talents needed to be an entrepreneur. It's amazing new research. Well, what are talents overall? As the way Gallup defines talent is this naturally reoccurring pattern of feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that can be productively applied. A strength is your ability to use your talent for a positive outcome. So as we understand we have these talents, but until we learn how to use them, they won't be a strength. We know plenty of people who may have the talent of being able to get things done. You know, that question of, do you make a list to check things off? We know a lot of people that have that talent, but sometimes they're making the wrong list and they're doing the wrong things that don't need to be done right now. So we need to figure out what our talents are, and then how do we use them productively? These 34 talents, and in the Brand New events, we do in interactive workshops to help you understand your talents, be able to identify when you're using them at work. Oh, wow, so when I love to go to those meetings and just come up with hundreds of ideas for this new ad campaign, that's my ideation. Ideation is one of the strategic thinking themes. So when I also go to that meeting and we're in execution mode and I come in with 100 more ideas because I have ideation, that might be why everybody's upset with me, because we're in execution mode and we're done with coming up with more ideas. So it's helping you understand that's still a talent for you. Also, when do I need to use it? In these 4 domains, you can think the executing domain, we all need to get work done. Those are our executing talents. We need to influence others, that we have influencing talents. We also have relationship building talents. And then we have how we work with information. Now, the goal isn't that you have one from every category. Some people have them all clustered in one area. Some people might not have very many top talents in executing, and yet they're still able to get things done. The question is really this idea of taking what you have, being able to define it, because as you move forward in your career, you need to be able to understand where do you fit on a team. If you're somebody with a lot of influencing and strategic thinking themes, you love to go in a room and convince people to do some great idea. You're the person that figures out what mountain we're going to climb. You're one of those dreamers, right? That's you. Who do you partner with in order to make sure those dreams become a reality and more than just some great idea? You're going to need executors. You're going to need people that get you up that mountain. This idea is that your team is well-rounded. People are rigid. We know, we're headed into the World Series pretty soon. I collected baseball cards. I know we'll see Gary Vaynerchuk later. As a kid, I was a big baseball card collector. And one of the things we always would see in baseball is how it never really worked when you started to move. Maybe when the catcher would get older, we still wanted to keep him around, we'd move him to first base. It never really works when you move people out of their position. You need to bring your A game, but how do you do that if you don't know what that is? How do you do that if you're not able to define them to your boss, to your manager, to your team, to say, oh, you don't want me on that part of this project, I'm going to be really better off serving you here. Through the events with Brand U, what we're really trying to do is help you identify those talents. And we use the Gallup Strength Finder because as a psychologist who has not also managed thousands of people, what I have found is it's the best assessment to help you identify your talents. There's a lot of others. This is the stickiest that people can use with the most ease. We want to help you identify your talents. We want to help you figure out how are you applying them and how do you learn to aim them at your career. The goal is really to help you figure out how do you spend more of your day doing what you do well and doing what you love, managing around what you don't do well, and off of those projects that are killing you. We want you to be in the 2 out of 10 people who get to say they can do what they do best every day. Thank you.